Corporate deal making, prone to unexpected twists and turns in the best of times, has been upended by the coronavirus pandemic. One logical way of thinking could be that it would be a good time for deal making and bargain buys as the sentiment is low. Logic dictates that targets will be keen to close and build a war chest, especially given private equity is sitting on a huge dry powder and will be motivated to locate arbitrage opportunities. With such a question in the mind, I did speak with a PE investor a week back, and he quipped, "The phone is not even ringing for Charlie Munger." Of course, referring to the Wall Street Journal piece, where the vice chairman of the most successful investment firm, Berkshire Hathaway, mentions that nothing is happening, no activity or interest from the targets. Thus, even for seasoned investors, it's a long waiting game. Investors are waiting on the sidelines. Closing deals will be challenging due to disruption impacting earnings, cash flows, working capital, and hence it will be critically important for companies to clearly factor in these impacts in their business plans after third-party due diligence. In the latest dispatch of Mint Insight, we speak with Kuldeep Tikka, partner and leader transaction diligence EY, and Bharat Anand, a partner in Ketan and Company, heading their corporate M&A practice, to really understand and decode deal making in times of the corona and how will it also impact diligence and other metrics going forward.
So the effort here, the next 30 minutes, basically trying to understand that what really is the so-called new normal for the deals ecosystem. This word is kind of loosely bandied around now. One can understand the impact across sectors, but in your conversations with deal makers, which essentially includes the fund managers and the LPs, what really has been the immediate impact, and how does that translate into various aspects of deal making? I can perhaps begin with you, Kuldeep, and then get on to Bharat.
Thanks, Srija. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for organizing this. Now, essentially, your question on new normal, I would possibly say that these days, every day is a new day. It's really too early to predict a new normal right now. I think when we talk to funds, when we talk to various corporates, etc., we're realizing that everybody is still grappling with the situation. The entire impact of the situation is still not seen as yet. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for things to really get to normal. And when I say a little bit of time, I mean it could be possibly about 9 months to a year, could be even more. I can talk to you about what we are seeing in deals happening, and that's only a temporary phenomenon. I would say this phenomenon is only a temporary phenomenon, as I said, in the short term, 9 months to a year or so. So what we are seeing in the deal space is we have seen 70 to 80% of the deals that we're currently working on fall sideways. Because of reasons that both buyer as well as sellers in majority of the cases decided that possibly this is the time when they cannot really take any call, either on the earnings, the most future earnings potential of the company, as well as also on valuation. So most of the cases, deals have fallen apart. Certain sectors we're still seeing deals happen. So you heard about the Facebook transaction that got announced today. There are the pharmaceutical sector, there are a few deals that are currently ongoing. In the financial services market also, we are seeing a couple of deals that are going through more representative of confidence capital, which is required in those companies, or maybe a couple of stress situations. So there are a few sectors where we're seeing deals flow still happening, deals still continuing. But generally, my sense is that in today's world, deal making has slowed down temporarily. I think one situation, once people have a feeling for the real situation, then I think deal activity will again pick up.
Sure. I'll sort of get you, Bharat, in. I think sort of what Kuldeep just mentioned, that about the 60 to sort of 80% deals in their pipeline is perhaps falling sideways. And he also mentioned that there are some sectors where deals are still happening. When we speak to experts, there has also been a terminology that this perhaps is a more of an uneven recession, where some boats are also looking high for some sectors like education, tech, or the technology sector, so to speak. But for the traditional industries, there has definitely been a slowdown. One logical explanation that perhaps one would think that because sentiment is so low and the private equity guys are sitting with such high dry powder, this could be a great time for deal making, but that is not necessarily the case, really. What is your sense?
Yeah, so I'd firstly agree with Kuldeep that it's too early to generalize and to say that there is a new normal. As you said, right, it's patchy. and different people are reacting to this, in different ways. So if you speak to strategics, if you speak to people who want to raise capital or sell something, they're kind of wondering that, look, is now the time to really clinch this? Will things be much worse 6 months later? Or, and therefore this is the right time? Or if you look at the preceding 6 months where things were much better, and things could rectify themselves, then nobody wants to look stupid to commit to a process right now. So certainly things have hit the pause button. I think strategics currently that are sitting on cash are saying that, look, cash is the best asset that you can be in. So hold cash, or look at buybacks, look at, potentially delisting, but I think it's too complicated as a process. If you look at financial investors, as you said, they're sitting with dry powder, and they will say that, look, cash as an asset class will depreciate. So we better deploy that before that were to happen. So I think if you look at transaction activity as a whole, there will be patches of transactions. There are the structured debt players out there, and there are a number of corporates who are severely levered. And so in order to shore up cash to stay and fight for another day, I think some of those people will turn to structured debt and structured debt instruments. So, people will look at, personal insolvency in a big way. So there are a number of issues out there in terms of what's going to happen in the transaction world. But the classic, transactional activity, M&A activity has slowed down, has certainly hit the pause button.
I think one sense I'm getting from both of you that deal activity will definitely see a huge slowdown. There could be some deals here and there, but the large consensus seems to be emerging that deal makers seem to have hit a pause button. Now tell me a little about diligence then. How does due diligence change in the face of this? Bharat was kind of mentioning the fact that nobody really knows that the next 6 months will things get normal. There's a huge uncertainty. It seems like a bottomless pit that we are into. Like, what really is the bottom, one does not really know. So how have diligence metrics really changed in times like this?
Yeah, so from a financial diligence perspective, I think a lot will change. Look, one of the key things that we do in financial diligence is basically to get to normalized profitability of a business. Now, in today's world, how do you look at normalized? So the only way you can look at normalized is basically you dissect whatever changes you are seeing in the financial performance of a company between what is temporary and what is permanent. So temporary is something that you can say short term, and hence, even though this is the impact, but will not impact the normalized profitability. Long term, obviously, you will have to bake it in the long term projections of the company. So that's one key change from a diligence perspective, is to basically make a pro forma profitability of things. The other important point from a diligence perspective is essentially related to the profitability is the working capital. Again, normalized working capital. So companies' working capitals have seen significantly getting impacted because of the current crisis. So one will have to predict what is the required working capital now before making an investment. That will require you to make estimates which are much more detailed than what you've been making in the past. Companies will have to go back a lot into operation details to come out with the working capital requirement in the normalized world. And third and most important change in a diligence from a diligence perspective is the whole focus on operational and distribution diligence. I think in the past, from a diligence perspective, it's mainly been focused, as I said, on financials and on the profitability on the balance sheet. But now I think how a company is operationally structured, where are the plants located, what is the distribution channel are they using indirect, are they using direct? Those things will be very, very critical to evaluate. So I'll say that the marketing, operation, and distribution diligence will become a very, very critical part of any diligence exercise that we will see going forward, apart from, of course, the financial diligence.
Okay, Bharat, Kuldeep said that the marketing operational diligence will also sort of factor in a big way. In terms of the contracts and term sheets, being issued to, respective companies, any stricter clauses coming in there by way of legal diligence, just because there's so much huge uncertainty and nobody knows on the both sides where we are headed?
Yeah, no, I think maybe if I take off from where Kuldeep left, I think, if you just put yourself in the shoes of, say, you're a Japanese investor and you're looking at investing in a manufacturer in Pune, what you would like to do is to actually turn up and to see, look, is the factory that you think exists actually there? What are the labor relations like?
Sure.
What is the management? You've seen something on paper, but you then want to, apply your chemistry to it and see what is the body language, what are the skills when you test people and you interview them. So how do you just get that done? I think that's going to change considerably in terms of planning. And then if you look at say for example from a legal standpoint, what would we do? We would say, okay, let's look at the top customers, the top suppliers, and let's look at their contracts. But then what about their solvency now? And that plays into the point that Kuldeep was making, that look, is the customer base really bankable? Is the supplier base really bankable? Are the distribution channels bankable? And it'll have other issues, right? Because what is happening now is behavioral change, and the impact that behavioral change will have on valuation and on the valuation metrics will also have a huge issue. So I think from a diligence standpoint, really one thing we will see is that because sellers have become financially stretched, I think we will see more warranty and indemnity insurance playing out. Therefore, the diligence will really be established partly by what the insurers have to say and how the insurers want the diligence to be carried out. So it will be very important for all the stakeholders really to sit on the table, upfront, establish the scope, see, for example, if it's a complex group holding, what are we getting into? Are we getting into intergroup transactions? How far up are we looking at? And then really establish the framework of the diligence. And of course, then the diligence will throw up issues, and those issues will be mitigated through, the use of conditions, maybe structures. So conditions before one parts with cash, that's what we use. We use structures in terms of, say, escrows or contingent consideration, earnout mechanisms. So a lot of that will come in because one would not want to go to recourse. In a deal situation, one would really want to have a structural solution which one controls, rather than have a solution which is, administered through a court process or an external process.
Yeah, Peter, just to pick up on Bharat's point regarding operational diligence, I think from a plant visit perspective, I recently learned that a large MNC is essentially organizing a plant visit through drones. So they're basically getting the entire plant surveillance done through a drone. And that video is being shared with all the prospective investors. So that, if that can give you the sense of things to come, right?
Yeah.
So if you're sitting in Japan and there's a plant in Pune, this is how diligences, at least some piece of diligences will be done.
Hello.
In terms of making information accessible. So digitization, using technology, all of these things are going to become, to pick up your earlier point, the new normal going forward.
I was talking to a fund manager 3 days back, and he told me, and it was a joke that he cracked with me over phone, that Shrija, phone is not even ringing for Charlie Munger, the Berkshire Hathaway guy. And he was basically quipping to that famous Wall Street Journal piece that everything is silent. Nobody really knows what really is happening. So give me a realistic sense, both on the M&A side. Of course, PE side, one can expect some growth activity. But on the M&A front, which really is at the heart of deal making, what really is the sense there?
Yeah, so I have to say, although I'm a lawyer and I'm paid to be cynical, I have to share Kuldeep's optimism. I would say that, look, we have to look at it from a wider lens, right? There is the underlying resilience of the Indian economy. There was a list published of Asia Pac's 500 fastest growing firms, and India contributed the highest number amongst the Asia Pac region. Yeah. Maybe not the highest in terms of, their turnover and profitability, but in terms of numbers. So that's the underlying potential. And, clearly, the advent of Jio, the advent of, mobile internet and e-commerce has actually unleashed that, in some ways, right? In some ways, our mobile revolution has been the backbone of our fintech economy, and that economy is here to stay. And, we're only playing into it. So in some ways, this diversification that is taking place, the pandemic in some ways will accelerate the trend that was really starting. And so I think you will see a plethora of activity, on that score. You will also see a plethora of activity which is slightly perverse. For example, we now have the IBC, the NCLT is closed at the moment, but the minute the NCLT opens up, you'll see several applications being filed. And as a result of those, through the course of time, you will see resolution plans come up. Hopefully, more assets get resolved. I think I would really say two things, right? One is that India seems to be losing out a little bit because of our regulatory structure, our tax structure. It's still complex to do business in India. if that can be eased in some ways, I think we will attract more capital and not have a situation where, look, Indian startups 2 years later say that the largest market is Bangladesh or Vietnam or somewhere outside India rather than India. Because if you're a startup in India, by definition, your largest market should really be India, because India is a massive market. We have a market-driven thesis. So one has to really get into why is it that for some of these companies, which are even in the fintech space or the export space, India is really not the number one market, and to do everything to promote, entrepreneurship now. I think now is really the time for regulators to use this as a moment, to get, these tax regulatory hiccups really ironed out, and to make the environment much more entrepreneur friendly. I do think momentarily M&A is down. And as I said before, if you're an independent director on a board and someone tells you that, look, we're about to do this transaction, how do you price it? All multiples now look, very different from what is normal. The deal may be the most sensible thing you're doing if the market is going to crash 6 months later, but it could actually be a very unattractive deal if things shape up and improve. So I think it's a momentary crisis, and one can't really look at it in terms of, at least I hope, that this is a trend that is going to be established over a long term or even a medium term. I think let's talk next quarter and see what that looks like when people have digested the impact.
On the M&A point, just picking up on China's example, I was talking to one of our partners in China recently. Their experience has been that post the lockdown opening up, they've actually seen local M&A and local PE funds being able to take decisions much faster. Global PE funds are also coming around, but that's what the experience is that local M&A, cross-border M&A will slow down for sure because of reasons that we know. But local M&A as well as local private equity folks will probably be much more faster off the block compared to the other deal makers.
Interesting. My last question to both of you. We spoke about the challenges, the problems, the trends we're seeing in other markets. So what about the solutions? When you are talking to private equity investors, strategics, what really are you advising or telling them? What are the specific questions playing out in their minds? And if you to give me like 2 key, takeaways or trends, and then we conclude there then. Yeah. Like for instance, the big question in the minds of like almost every VC fund right now is that where is SoftBank when you need it the most, right? It really is nowhere to be seen. They're going through their own challenges. But leaving aside SoftBank on the lighter side, when you speak with fund managers or M&A guys, the 2 questions which invariably come in every conversation and 2 solutions that you're telling them.
Yeah. So essentially from my discussions with the PE folks, they're largely focused on the portfolio at the moment. As far as new deals is concerned, people are evaluating or talking about new deals only from an opportunistic perspective. There is something that it's easy to take a call on or a sector that's not immediately impacted. But a lot of focus for PEs have been on the portfolio. So I hear about regular weekly review calls being held with the portfolio, mainly on understanding impact on the business, cash conservation, cash flow management. So I think that's something that PEs are very, very focused on. In terms of, that's one thing that I'm hearing from them. The second thing that I'm hearing from them is the cautious optimism. As I said, and my optimism is also flowing back from the conversation that I have had with the private equity folks. They're again seeing it as kind of a phenomena that will come back. So they are looking at identifying companies that they can look at doing deals 6 months later. So they're telling us, why don't you help us identify companies that will possibly need capital 6 months from now? So they are seeking help in that respect, identifying, because so there are a few funds that are looking at pipe transactions as well. I'm not talking about traditional pipe, but they're seeing a lot of opportunity in the listed market. I'm talking about private markets. So funds are asking us to identify companies for them, which are large, good consumer, essentially I would say good cash flows, good balance sheets, but may still need capital because of the current crisis. So that's what we're hearing from PE funds. One is working with the portfolio companies, and second, identifying companies that may need capital 6 months from now.
I would tend to agree with that. I think, we did a recent survey through the Indian Venture Capital Association, and one of the outputs was that it's really, cash management. I think portfolio company cash management was the top priority of GPs. And it's funny also that solvency normally when you talk about venture capital and private equity, the word solvency really doesn't come up, right? It's valuation, but not solvency. But solvency risk was also a risk that was cited that is coming up, in discussions. And really, in terms of problem areas or in terms of, last comments, I would just add that, now is the time to really consider, given that, soon we will be over the RBI's moratorium period. We will see what sort of a package the finance ministry comes up with. But it is really now a time to see whether we need an alternative mechanism within the, insolvency and bankruptcy code, really, to allow for a debtor in possession model as opposed to our current creditor in possession model, at least for the MSME sector, for smaller companies, and to really also re-examine whether Section 29A needs to be reformed again for MSME companies, because that's where a bulk of the employment really lies. And lastly, to see, and I think Kuldeep and his firm is better placed to comment on it, but is this the right time for the government to really create some tax amnesty scheme to again, with some riders, to say that, look, at least if that is deployed in CapEx and in employment generation activities, there is some redemption if the government can sell that and build the confidence around that.
So much, Bharat and Kuldeep. I think we had a very insightful conversation. We sort of unraveled various aspects of deal making, starting from diligence to what it means for sectors and strategics and all kinds of investors. Thank you for joining me in from where you are, and I do hope you and yours are doing well. And till the time we see you next, goodbye and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shija. Goodbye. Thank you. Stay safe.
Safe.
Bye.
Thank you.